All right, welcome back. In this section, what we're going to talk about is actually setting up the governance within Unity Catalog. So, at this point, what we have right now is we have four. Let's hop on over to Databricks real quick. We should have four accounts. So, we've got one for our hub, and then we've got dev, QA, and prod. So, we've got our four accounts. Within those accounts, we now have a meta store, and then that meta store has been assigned out to each one. So, we've kind of got it in the kind of that centralized hub, and then that hub has got a metastore assignment to each of the various workspaces. So that's four. That's I guess four in total that we're looking at. But we don't really have any data in there that we care about yet. So there's no catalogs, and then there's not really any users or groups. So what we need to do is add users and groups, and then start assigning them permissions. So the first thing that I want to do is kind of start with my default group, which is my data engineers. So I'm going to start this within my Unity hub level, and you can kind of do this however you want, but for me, I'm just going to pull this in and say, let's just bring this in over here. Let's take a look at the code. And so I'm setting up a group, a user, and then I'm adding that user to the group. In order to do this, I am going to use my Datbricks provider for the account level. I'm going to pull in an email address for my username, and this email address is one that is an Active Directory. So this is an Azure Active Directory or Microsoft Intra. So this helps kind of govern our permissions at the AD level as well as within Databricks. So if you're not a member of this Active Directory, then you wouldn't be able to authenticate. So this kind of helps with that multi-factor, dual-factor authentication when logging into a workspace. Again, this is going to be using that Databricks account level provider. And I do have a note here on this word force, so I've got it set to true. So an example of why you might want this is, let's say that I've got an engineer as a user, and I've got that user is in multiple groups. Well, if you created it this way, and then you tried to put this user into a second group, then it might crash on you saying, well, hey, that user already exists. So setting this to true, what that does is it allows me to go ahead and create that user anyways, even if they do exist. So it just doesn't fail on me. Additionally, disable as user deletion is false. So if this was defaulted or just set to true, if I was to do a Terraform teardown, this is another one of those things with Terraform versus APIs and that sort of thing. If I just did a Terraform teardown or destroy, this user would be turned inactive, but they would still exist. So this would actually remove the user as opposed to just deactivating them or disabling them. And then what I'm doing is just taking this Databricks group membership and grabbing the group ID that I just showed you, grabbing that member ID that I showed you, the provider, which is databricks.thisaccount, and then I'm doing a depends on for this group membership saying, well, hey, it depends on both of these two items already being created. As long as those items are created, you should be good to go. So what I'm going to do is we're going to say Terraform apply. And one thing to kind of step back and talk about is this kind of whole concept of pets versus cattle. So what we're stepping into now is this kind of like permissions, governance, and then also the data piece, because we're getting into the catalogs. So you can put your catalogs into a CI/CD pipeline, but personally, I'd really highly advise against it because we don't want to treat our catalogs the same as the rest of our infrastructure. You never want to accidentally destroy that. So we want to be really intentional about everything we do from this point forward. I'm going to go ahead and apply this and say yes. So this should be pretty quick. And what we're going to do is hop over to the Databricks account, and I'll refresh this. So we should get a new user being created here in just a minute. So go to my users, and this is what we see. We've got a new user created, and then we've got a group created. And if we go into that group, we can see that that user has been added. So that's kind of all that's going on there. So at this point, we've got a simple user and a simple group. They've been added. But this is just at the hub level. So the next thing that I want to do is I want to go ahead and kind of fan out to the spokes. So if I just drop back down from my directory, and if I say cd ... and we change into the dev environment, let's just clear it out real quick. And remember, when I'm doing this, I am pointing at my Unity spoke, and even though I am technically pointing at my dev environment, I'm still logged in through my hub subscription because I'm managing everything from my hub at this point. So this is all about governance at this point. I'm not, I'm kind of environmentally specific, but I'm logged into multiple environments at this point. So with that said, let's see what we can bring in here. We've already got the Metastore brought in, but now let's go ahead and grant some users access to a workspace. So before we do that, let's actually take a look at this workspace. We'll take a look at the hub, and then we'll take a look at the dev workspace also, just as a couple of points of reference. So far I've been hopping over to the manage the account, but let's actually go to the admin settings for this one. So the admin settings are going to be kind of workspace level settings. And if I go to I believe it's my identity and access under workspace admin, I should be able to see my users and groups. So let's just pop over to groups real quick. So I just have these two default users and groups, or these two default groups. What I want to do is actually add the data engineers to one of these groups at least. And I might not necessarily do it in this hub, but I might actually do that in the dev environment. So that's what we're getting ready to do now. So let's hop over here to the admin settings. We are in the dev workspace, as you can see. We're going to the workspace admin settings of identity and access. See our users real quick. So it's just me right now. And then go to the groups. Again, we just have those two default groups, which again, we need to talk about these default groups here in a little bit as well. I personally like to make some changes to those, but all right, so here we go. So we're pointing at, we're in dev, in the dev directory, and we're pointing up to the Unity spoke. And so the first thing that I want to do is I want to grant some access. So grant workspace groups is kind of the next thing. So where is it? Grant workspace groups. So what I'm doing is, this is a Datbricks managed workspace permission assignment. I've got this kind of for each loop here that's going off to my Datbricks propagation. We can really ignore this because it's not mandatory, but for me, when we scale out later, what I want to do is go through this propagation folder or file, and I'm basically looking for my groups. So I'm going to go through each one of these groups. So in the future, if we want to extend this, we can have multiple groups and we would just go through this list. But right now I'm just doing one, and then we'll extend this later. So back to this piece. What we're doing is workspace assignment for each, but right now it's really just for one. The workspace is, I'm calling it again, quote unquote, this workspace, which if you remember from a previous video, this workspace is the dev workspace. The principal ID, well, this is that Datbricks group that we literally just created. The permissions is coming from, I guess, each dot value. So remember, this is a for each. So I'm going to go ahead and set my permissions up here from this JSON file. So if I have permissions, I am adding the data engineers as an admin in this workspace. So if you don't want to do the for each section there, you can just put admin or put whatever workspace level permissions you want. So let's go back to the workspace. The provider, again, this is an account level provider. I mean, this depends on both my Metastore, and then I've also put this this time_sleep dot wait 30 seconds feature in here. So I don't really know how to describe this, but basically the permissions API paired with Terraform, it just doesn't really work the best all the time. So sometimes these permissions, they try to deploy faster than the underlying resources, even if you got depends on blocks sometimes. It just causes this thing to fail and to error out. So sometimes it's smart to maybe do this a different way. So maybe do this with the actual Datbricks API after all of your infrastructure has been stood up, or do it as a separate step the way I'm doing it here, as opposed to just trying to shotgun everything all at once. That said, we do need to pull in the Datbricks group itself to get the ID. And so again, I would typically be looping through if I wanted to have multiple groups brought in at once. I'm just doing the one right now, but I'm just going to grab that group name from my file, get the provider So again, that's just kind of helped me, propagate later on if I had more teams. But we just have the one. So we're going to run a Terraform apply, and hopefully this won't take too long. As a refresher, what we're doing is we're looking to see that we get a new group added here, and we want it to be that data engineering group. I do want to point out as well that since I'm doing a for each for this, it assumes that we at least have one item in that loop. And so that's why I'm kind of starting off with this data engineering one, because ideally these are going to be the people that would be working in here the most. Data engineers, data scientists, they're going to be the ones managing this workspace. So we're really going to kind of hand this over to them when they're kind of ready to go. And then what we might do is say, well, hey, like, what if we had other teams? So I'm just, for simplicity in the future, we'll call them, team or test group A, test group B. Yeah, you kind of get the picture there. Okay, so the code is running. I've said yes. I'm letting it apply. It's all green. So if I come here, I should be able to refresh. And I'll point up here to the top right. We are in the dev workspace, and I've got a data engineers group with one member in it. If we take a look at that member, this is who they are. If I go to their, I can't remember if it's their entitlements. So we don't have anything enabled by default for their entitlements. And let's see, for this actual engineer, they've got their access, their admin access is on. So yeah, it's kind of cool. All right, so we said we've got the meta store has been assigned. We've got users created now. We've got groups created with some basic permissions. Let's see, what else do we want to do? The next thing I guess we could do is let's go on ahead and take a look at external locations. So I'm going to bring this in. So if I come over here to the actual workspace, where are we? X out of this, X out of this, go to my dev workspace. Go to my catalog. And then we're going to come down here to the options at the bottom. So we don't have any catalogs right now, but we do have external data. The external data, the only external data we have right now is the actual meta store itself, and that's about it. So we're going to want to create some additional external locations. So what we're going to do is create a storage credential. It's an external storage credential. And this is going to be an access connector or an Azure managed identity. And it's going to have an access connector ID. Well, then what we're going to do is point that and give it permission to use an external location. And we're going to give it the external locations of catalog and landing, which are two containers within a storage account. And then we're going to use that for building out our catalogs. So we've got the external locations piece here. So we're just going to run a Terraform apply. And we're doing this all in dev right now too. So what we're going to do in a minute is switch over to QA and then prod and try to run this code there as well. But let's take a look at kind of what this is doing. So we've already run through this whole storage credential piece before for the Metastore. What I'm doing now is kind of building out dynamically the identity connector ID, which basically you're pointing to your subscription ID, which I'm grabbing that as a variable. Your resource groups, specify your resource group. Let's just go ahead and say yeah to allow that to apply. Providers, Microsoft, Datbricks. So this is just another way to grab existing resources. It's just, if you know the pattern, it's just to rebuild that pattern. But at the end of the day, all I'm doing is just grabbing this ID. And then next up is just kind of pointing to those locations so that it has access to use them. And so there you go. We've got a storage credential now, and then that storage credential, what are we calling this? This is a credential for the data platform for the dev environment. And then that credential has access to the data platform catalogs _dev, and then the data platform _landing dev. So that is what we wanted for that. Next up, let's go on ahead and create some catalogs to use now. So when we look at our catalogs, we've got this kind of catalog schema binding, which we've got a few options for how we do this, but what I'm going to do is bind catalogs to their respective environments. So we've got the Datbricks catalog for catalog, and then what this is going to have is a storage root location, which is kind of why we wanted to have that access connector just a minute ago. So we're just going to do this basically for each item in that propagation list, which right now is just the one. And then we're going to have the metastore ID, which I've already showed you how to grab that before. We're going to give this thing a name, so I'm just going to kind of grab the name of the catalog out of it. So basically for each, grab the catalog, and then we're going to do the var of the environment. So for this one, it's going to be dev. If we take a look at this one again, the catalog name is just very simple. It's just going to be called catalog. If we bring this up to future ones, I'm calling this kind of like this default one catalog. Future ones is going to be more explicit about, test group underscore dev, test group underscore, So you can kind of have your own names there. Just make sure that they don't overlap. Let's go back to the bindings though. So we kind of got the metastore ID. We're giving it a name. We're giving it a storage root, force destroy. I'm setting this to true since this is like a test environment, but you'd want to be careful here. You might not want to force destroy it. This part, what I'm doing is setting the isolation mode to yes, isolated. I'm giving it a little comment just so you can see, like, if you wanted to give it a description, you could. The provider here, I'm actually setting this to the hub workspace. So, and I've got the depends on block is the metastore assignment and the Datbricks external location that exists. But what I'm doing is I'm setting this up so that when we look at our kind of hub and spoke, if we assume that the data engineers and data scientists, like the main data people, if they're working out of here and we're doing all the ETL for the company and that sort of thing, that we're all going to have access to it in this main metastore. But then if you are a sub-member of the company and maybe you work in the dev workspace or, test group A or test group B's workspace, for example, what I'm going to do is kind of bind it to that workspace. So in this scenario, what we're going to say is, well, hey, the dev catalog is going to be available here and here. The QA catalog will be available here and here. Same with the prod. Prod will be available here and here. But then dev will not be available in these other non-dev workspaces, if that makes sense. So that's by design. That's kind of a preference of mine. All right, so then the primary binding to a workspace of interest, this is kind of where I'm just kind of going through that Datbricks propagation list again. The securable name is I'm just kind of grabbing the name from it. The workspace ID, I've already showed you how to grab the workspace ID. Provider is Datbricks. Again, this is for the hub. So then we got the depends on block. Next up, we're going to have some catalogs. Or I should say some schemas. So within a catalog, you're going to have schemas, and what I'm going to create is a kind of a bronze, silver, and gold schemas. And so these are going to kind of go through that same list, and then what we're going to do is grab the catalog name from that list. So we've already kind of determined how we would kind of build this catalog, and so now I'm just grabbing the catalog name from it. And then I'm just giving this schema a name. So I'm just going to call it bronze. I'm giving it a comment. Again, this database is managed by Terraform. The storage root. So if you look at this, let's take a look at the root storage also. So the root storage for this is the storage account. And then I've got a container called catalogs. So the storage root for my catalogs will be in the catalogs folder within that storage account. And then for this, what I'm doing is kind of this /bronze, /silver, /gold. What I'm doing is kind of going one folder deeper so that the schema defaults into this location. So you really don't have to do that, but for me, it just makes it a lot easier and more organized if I ever want to navigate through my lake, so that I'm not sifting through GUIDs, but I'm actually sifting through meaningful folders. So let's go on ahead and say Terraform apply. Let's just kind of build this up and see how it looks. while that's building, let's go on ahead and head over here back to our catalog. Make sure that we are in the hub workspace. Do a refresh here in just a minute. Okay, we'll say yes. So before it builds, I just want you to see that we don't have this catalog underscore dev here, which is what we're going to see hopefully here in a minute. And then when we see that, we should also have 3 schemas underneath it. Give that just a minute. Okay, so you see now we have this catalog dev. We are in the hub workspace. And then we have the bronze, silver, and gold schemas that are all in there. Now, if we were to go to the dev workspace, let's hop over there real quick. Go to the catalog. And we see it here as well. And just so you can see though, it's not in the QA or production at this point. And just to confirm that, let's just hop all the way up to prod real quick. I'll launch this workspace. I'll be going ahead and X out of some of these things. Okay. Give it just a second. Yeah. Okay, so I'm logged in right now as as a global admin, so you can see that there's no access here. If I was logged in as a regular user that's not global admin, this would not be grayed out. It just would not even appear at all. Okay, so what's next? Next up, we want to do some catalog grants. So what I'm going to do is bring this in. The grants for this, what we're going to do is I'm going to kind of go through that same propagation list. We're going to set up our catalog. So we are basically just pointing to a name of a catalog that should exist that we've already created. I want to give it some certain privileges. So the principal is going to be the group, so that the Databricks group, and then the privileges are going to be the privileges for that group. So I've got that again in here. So the group is my principal, I believe, and then I've got the privileges is just all privileges, because my data engineers are going to be the admins on this, so they can do whatever they want. Let's move into the folder one more time. So we've got the grants on this. We'll do a Terraform apply. Give this just a minute. Before it does anything, let's hop back over here. I wanted to go, let's just refresh this because it should be here. If I hop into my catalog, we should be able to see the permissions on it. And so right now we don't see anything specific here. So this is actually applying the permissions at the moment. We'll say yes. Yes, we do want to do those. We do want to apply those permissions. Give it just a minute. Let's hop over here. I want to go ahead and refresh this once or twice. Permissions. Okay, there we go. So now we see data engineers. They have all privileges on that catalog. So that is what we wanted to see. I'm going to go ahead and let's just do the rest of this stuff as well. I want to give these groups their own secret scope as well. So this is a Databricks secret scope. We'll say for each Databricks group in this propagation list. Again, you can really ignore this for now. We'll come back to this later on. And what I'm going to do is just grab the name from it though. So kind of whatever you want to name it. I've got some key vault metadata here. So if you remember before, we created a key vault. This key vault, you can recreate the resource ID again. I like doing the pattern sometimes. It's just fun. So I'm doing the subscription. I'm doing the subscription ID, resource group, the environment. So this is dev, providers. Again, one of the things too to remember with, I'll say, storage accounts and key vaults is that those names are globally unique across all of Azure. So when you're creating your names up front, just make sure that you're creating a kind of a weird enough pattern that it's not already used somewhere else. Otherwise, you'll run into an issue. The DNS name is just HTTPS, and then it's kind of it's just kind of it's basically just rebuilding that DNS name of your key vault. The provider for this one is a workspace level provider. So this is going to be kind of at each workspace. So like our dev workspace, our QA workspace, and so forth. So I'm creating the scope for this. And then the actual scope itself is going to be a Datbricks secret ACL. So I think that's an access control, whatever. So what we're doing is, again, iterating through our groups. I'm picking out the group name. I'm going to give them permission to read from it. So I don't really care if they write or manage it, but right now we're just limiting this to read. So so that way if there's like a secret in there that I put in there, like somebody doesn't accidentally overwrite it. The scope would then be the Datbricks secret scope that we have up here. And so I'm just kind of iterating through this and just grabbing the name out. If you just have one, you don't have to worry about each key. The provider, again, this is for the Datbricks workspace level. And then what I'm doing is making sure that there's a depends on block. So it depends on that secret scope and then the workspace assignment. So let's do a Terraform apply real quick. And I want to talk about that for just a second. So I really don't like using depends on blocks within Terraform. With it being stateful, I feel like Terraform should just know that this stuff is referencing this and that it needs these things to build anyways. But Terraform doesn't necessarily know that for whatever reason. I've had it fail before, so I have to add these depends on blocks. And so like when I start getting into permissions management and things like that, it's really annoying that just how fragile this part of the code can be. So let's let this build out. We'll say, yes, we'll let it apply. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video while it applies. All right, we're back. What we just created, if you wanted to do it manually, you would pretty much go to the end of your URL and then add this kind of secrets and create scope. So that's kind of where you would go to do that. And then I guess these properties will be available in your actual key vault. So yeah, just that way if you want to work within Python and reach out to your secrets, then you have that ability. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and clear this. We created a ton of resources just now. Might as well go on ahead and create a serverless warehouse as well. I'm pretty sure that's free to set up, just as long as we're not actually using it. Actually, no, I'm gonna keep that off to the side. I'll come back to that later. Okay. So we've created a ton of resources, all this green stuff. What we're gonna do is head over now to cd.qa, and we're gonna do a Terraform apply now for the QA environment. So hopefully all the things that we just kind of created incrementally, we should be able to create at once for QA. So let's actually, while we're here, let's take a step back and go to my QA Datbricks workspace. Let's launch it. And let's take a look at this real quick. So while this is getting ready, I wanted to show you something else too. Your workspaces, if you recall, we created my hub workspace was a pet, and I created that as myself. So I did that locally through Visual Studio Code. The same thing with dev. I tested my dev locally and then pushed that up through through into GitHub Actions, and then the next workspace QA and prod were both created by my service principals through GitHub Actions, which is why the name under it is a GUID of a service principal rather than the name of my email address. So just kind of something fun to call out there. Let's see where we are with this. So it's going to create 12 resources, so we'll say yes, we will allow it to do that. There's a good chance this will fail, but we'll see. So we are here. We are going to take a look at my catalogs. We shouldn't really have any special catalogs here, just the dev one that's kind of grayed out right now. And then if I go to my admin settings, let's take a look at what we have here. Identity and access, manage these groups. All right, so we've got data engineers here now. We go back to the catalogs. So we've got the QA catalog and those three schemas. If we take a look at the permissions, we can see that the data engineers have all privileges, external data. We now have we've got a storage credential, and we have external locations. So we're kind of seeing this build out now pretty nicely. So that was quick. So let's cd back to prod now. Terraform apply. So we're going to build the same thing here as well. All right, so this is building. Let's give this just a minute to wrap up. Almost done. We'll say yes, let that apply. Now it knows what it needs to do. So if I go to my prod workspace, go to my catalog, we see that it's got the metastore assigned to it. We see dev and QA. We don't see prod just yet. So that should happen any minute. So it's doing some permissions. I see some catalogs. So let's refresh this. All right, so now you can see those other two are grayed out, but now we do have this prod one. Yeah, I can't really access this from here. There's not really anything I can do. Again, I'm in here as a global admin, so that's why my view is a little different. But if I was, someone else with less elevated permissions, more restricted permissions, then my line of sight would be a lot blurrier than it is right now. There'd be a lot less visibility. So okay, so this is just about everything I wanted to cover in this section. The next section, what we're going to do is talk about, well, what if we actually wanted to scale this out and have like multiple teams within one of these workspaces, and they wanted their own resources. So really, kind of how do we take this and then scale it out? So that's going to be in the next video. So yeah, I will see you there.